Good morning. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here today. Thank you. I must admit, being asked to keynote this event earlier this year before I reclaimed my maiden name of Shaheed, I sit in a space of gratitude. And as I reflect upon this opportunity to be with you today, I have to go back to my truth. And the truth and reality is, keynoting a charter conference is not something that I ever saw myself doing before, especially the day before my school goes on fall break. Please cover the school while I'm here. I was a little girl who knew when I was in second grade that I wanted to be a teacher. And truly, that was the only plan that I had intentionally had laid out. The journey from there has been one that only God knew would take off. So, as I come to you all today from Indianapolis to kick off what I know will be a great conference, I thank you for welcoming me. Now, it is no coincidence that we're all in this room together today, and it's no coincidence that I began my career as a 4th and 5th grade teacher. And so for those of you that have 10, 11, and 12-year-olds in your lives, you know they're a tough audience, a very, very tough audience. And I learned from my 4th and 5th graders many years ago that you got to keep your audience with you by being interesting and sharing things they actually care about, or within the next 5 minutes, everybody will be on their cell phones and making to-do lists and not listening to this keynote. So hopefully, I'll make my kiddos proud today. So in planning this keynote, I was happy to know that the theme was accelerating excellence. And while we're all a work in progress, the word excellence is one that my parents really imprinted upon me when me and my little sisters were little girls. And I'll show you a picture here. And I'm hoping the clicker and the video works today. So, I'm the little girl in the middle in the blue dress. And as you can see in this picture, I was excited to see the orchestra playing because I was also the little girl whose mama's looking down sternly at with instrument in my hand. But I show these pictures because this is pretty much the vision of what I grew up as a little girl in. I was born in southern Indiana and grew up K through 12 in Indianapolis, which is the capital city. And like all children, my first teachers were my parents, David and Brenda Shaheed. I was raised with both parents, a mother and father in the home, and raised in the 70s and 80s, my mom took on what I know to be the hardest job that a mother can have, and that's being a stay-at-home mother. And I say it's the hardest job because when my daughter, Salima, was born, I stayed home with her for 6 months, and I was never so fatigued and unproductive as when I attempted to do what my mother made look easy. While we were a middle-class family, our family of 6, mom, dad, 4 girls in the picture here, we rode to and from school on the bus, lived off one income, shared bedrooms, took road trips, and stayed at the Days Inn. We focused on practicing the violin, and Mom actually watched us do our homework and gave us critical feedback and made us practice until it was perfect. We ate at home 95% of the time, her home-cooked meals, the tuna fish, the turkey sandwiches, salmon croquettes, and the crowd pleaser breakfast for dinner. And I say all that to say that I grew up with a very healthy family support system. And it's something that so many of my 4th and 5th graders didn't have. And I didn't even know that other side until I began my teaching career. So like so many teachers that go into the profession at 22 years of age, I had 2 student teaching experiences. But the most powerful, heavy experience that I had to be successful was the experience that I had as a student in my mama's house. Because I learned from my mom how to give that really stern look to let the kids know you weren't playing games. I knew from her how to mean what I said and say what I meant. And the rock star teaching, that came many years later, of course. But truly the best educators that I had in my early years were my parents and also my 4th and 5th grade students, who gave me so much grace and allowed me to learn from them. And I was fortunate enough to have two of these students that shaped me into the educator that stands before you today. And I want to share a little bit about them. So that's me down at the bottom, giving the very best I can back when I was a Shaheed and back to Shaheed. But Teresa. So Teresa is my little girl that you see right there. And Teresa was the student that so many of us have heard about. No one wanted that child in their class because something just was wrong with her. So she was a child who underneath the table every day for the first 6 weeks, I had to coax her out from under the table. And she spoke with a little bit of a lisp when she talked. And she clearly looked Hispanic, but her parents were white, so she was adopted. And I would always say, so Teresa, where are you from? And she would say Nicaragua, which was Nicaragua. So this little girl right here, she really struggled with mental health issues. And you know when there's that kid that there's something going on and you can't quite name it? You saw something going on with her. But she was desperate to connect. So I remember when I would read aloud at my rocking chair with my 4th and 5th graders at my feet, she would rub my toenails. She would just rub my toenails. And it was the strangest thing, but to her, my accepting her as she was mattered. She was a little girl who, while I had to coax her out from underneath the desk the first 6 weeks of school, in aftercare, she would beg to sit in my room just to organize the books. She was desperate to connect. And I'll never forget the day I came home back when you had answering machines and you saw the blinking light. And I hit the light and it was her singing my name. Strange, but loving because it came from her. And what I learned from her was that you have to connect with the heart before you can ever educate a child. And that stays with me and stuck with me today. My other duckling here who changed me and formed me was Jason. And Jason came to me in the 5th grade after my students had been with me already for 4th grade. So what I didn't share was I was a 2-year teacher, taught with my kids multi-age and looped. So he came in the 2nd year of that loop. And when he came in, he was like, the best illustration I think of is like Peanuts, how Linus comes in, there's all this stuff behind him, like dust and just he was all over the place. And I remember my children in the classroom were just annoyed that he had entered into our classroom. But he was loud, he was obnoxious, and when I sat to read with him, he didn't know how to read. And I couldn't help but think, how did a child get to 5th grade and not be able to read? And so while I hated that feeling inside of me, it annoyed me that whatever lesson plan I had, it had to be pared down to work for Jason. And I met with my instructional coach and I was sharing with her how I've got this kid in my class, he's a 5th grader, he can't read, he doesn't know how to do anything. And she said to me, let me spend some time with him and I'll come back to you with some recommendations. And she left. He was gone with her for the morning, and she came back and she said, I want to show you something. And she showed me a little book that she had made with Jason. And she said, Ms. Shaheed, you said he couldn't read, but I asked him to go around the building and write down all the words that he knew. And I opened up the book, and at the time I was Carson. I wrote down the book, opened up the book, and the first word that he had written in the book was Carson, which was outside on my door. Being asset-based with our children is critical to being able to educate them. Because if we start with what they do know, we can build on to what they don't yet know. Keyword yet. The teacher in the room makes a difference. So I came to education to teach the unteachable and the unlovables. I came for the Jasons and Teresas. And after more than 2 decades of working in public education, in urban schools, that's the flag that I hold every single day. Before my staff, before my kids, the commitment to excellence for all kids. Not the kids who come to us ready to learn, but for all kids. And still today, I have left the grind of the classroom, and I'm still grateful that that's where I started. That I started in the classroom, working directly with the most important customers in our schools. It's the students. So I've been an assistant principal. I've been a principal and now a school founder and CEO. And it's still the classroom that gave me the most joy and the catalyst for the school that I founded. So when I transitioned out of the classroom in 2007 and became a principal, I was so excited to learn, though, about what was happening in other people's school. And I remember setting up my schedule to spend all this time in classrooms, like many of you. And when I went into the classrooms, I was pretty young, I think, at the time, and the teachers weren't used to that. They weren't used to principals coming into their classrooms all the time, and you could tell they were a little annoyed. But I wanted to learn from them, just like I'd learned from my kids. And I came in with my notebook, and I would take notes, and I would ask questions of the teachers. And it was the questions and the note-taking that really seemed to offend them. But again, I'm there for the unteachable. I'm there for the unlovable. And I'm there to ask the questions that other people weren't asking. So when I identified the gap from being in the classrooms, I went back to my principal, because I was an assistant at the time, and I said, you know, the teachers aren't really making lesson plans. And she's like, oh yeah, they're making lesson plans because they're teaching in front of the kids. But they weren't having lesson plans. It wasn't standards aligned. And so when I asked those kind of critical questions, the pushback that I got was unreal. I mean, literally, if the vision of like the union all coming after me for asking teachers questions was intense. And I later found out, because I was pushing them so hard, they had made me the target for the year. And if it wasn't one week, it was the next week that I was being called in for some kind of union dispute, because I asked critical questions. Because again, I'm there for the unteachable and the unlovable. And if it doesn't work for all kids, is it the right thing? So as a new leader, and being in the same building for 7 years, I was pushed and I was tested, like many of you. How do I hold teachers accountable for building the relationships with their Teresas and their Jasons? How do I help my teachers see the opportunity associated with having the special needs child in your class that's desperate to connect? And while I believe that we're doing the best that we can, there are many days that I wondered, is this too much? I had a 4-year-old at home and a husband at the time who traveled most days, and there was so much stress from this work. But without fail, the reason why I persisted was because I deeply believed that students needed a champion for them. And it was my job to hold adults accountable to delivering great instruction for all kids. And in my tenure as principal, I grew that school with all the critical feedback I got from the teachers, from a D-rated school in the state of Indiana to a B-rated school, from the bottom of the pack in the district to the top of the pack. And it's not because we farmed out all the unteachables and the unlovables. It's because we had a deep commitment to them. We made a commitment to all of the kids, and we held ourselves accountable to greatness. So if anyone would ever have asked me back then if I would be working, when I was working in a district, if I would work in a charter school, I would have said, absolutely not. I have to admit, as a traditionally trained educator, I had actually turned up my nose to charter schools because I didn't know what a charter school really was. Like so many people don't. Anybody else have that experience? Like you didn't know what a charter was and you thought it was something it wasn't. But anyway, I believe the rhetoric that the good kids were all in the charter schools and then everybody else was going to be left behind. That the charter schools kicked out all the unteachables and the unlovables. When actually I did my own research and saw something very, very different. I saw that in the charter space, there was a space for this educational market where innovation was welcomed. And the ideas that I had only dreamed about could actually happen. I became excited about the possibilities of founding my own school. And I remember attending the National Charter Conference in New Orleans. Admittedly, I was excited about New Orleans more than the conference, but with every single keynote speech at that conference, I wept. I wept because I felt like I was finally with my people. I was among believers who were finding ways to do things that others were casting out as impossible. So that charter conference deepened my commitment not only to building a great bilingual school, but to building a school where the Jasons and the Teresas would thrive, where teachers would be excited to serve them. So I wanted to bring my passion for education and for Spanish to create a school where largely underserved students will become bilingual and biliterate. And the biliterate piece always throws people off because people assume that if a child speaks Spanish, they can read and write, which most kids who speak Spanish in the United States, if they've been educated here, can't read and write. which is somewhat of a sin, considering we have so many students like this. But we have to begin by building an environment where we start to build from the child's heart and then build them up from there. So I want to show you a brief clip about what Global Prep Academy is. This is my home away from home. This is a place that I'm praying for right now as I'm here. But I want you to see this school where we commit ourselves to unlocking the world through language, experiential learning, and love. Let's see if this works. Prayers?
Buenos días. Muy bien, vamos a saludarnos. Daniel, pon atención. 1, 2, 3.
Domingo, lunes, martes, miércoles, jueves, viernes, sábado.
Una de las cosas especiales de estos estudiantes es que están expuestos a muchos maestros que hablan español de diferentes países.
The students at Global Prep come from all over the world, from all different languages and backgrounds, and they really do a really great job of coming together and learning together, and they really rise to the challenges that they're facing.
I think one of the great things about being an educator at Global Prep is knowing that we have the ability to make a difference, not only in the students' lives that we see, but presenting them with something new, something unique that benefits all. It's inclusive to everyone that comes to our doors.
Me encanta ser maestro en GPA porque tengo la oportunidad de enseñar a niños que vienen de 2 idiomas diferentes y me gusta mucho poderles transmitir mis conocimientos sobre mi propia lengua.
Escritura.
¿Todo junto?
This is my 14th year of being an educator. I originally began teaching in public schools in Pike Township and came aboard with Miss Carson at the very beginning, helping her develop a school from the ground up that was the best place for teachers to teach and students to learn.
I'm Mariama Carson, and I'm the founder and principal at Global Preparatory Academy at Riverside 44. The students learn how to read, write, and do math and English. That's half of their day. Their other half of their day, they're learning reading and writing in Spanish, but they're also learning science and social studies in Spanish too. So students learn about the civil rights movement through Spanish. Students learn about photosynthesis and life cycles of plants through Spanish.
Okay. Alrighty then. So there's a little bit more on there. The main thing that I think the takeaway that I want everyone to have is just the vision of the school. Our school is a 50-50 bilingual school. And again, it's a school where students normally wouldn't have had a bilingual education. So let me show you a few of our demographics. There we go. So we serve pre-K through grade 6. And 68% of our students are African American, and about 35% of our students are Hispanic. Now that allows us to have a two-way immersion where native English-speaking students learn from native Spanish-speaking students and vice versa. About 5% of our students are white. The other thing just to note, the majority of our students receive free and reduced price lunch, and 18% of our students receive special ed services, which is on par with the district where our students would normally attend. And 32% of our students are ESL. Now, the thing that is hard to understand, and I think especially as I talk to educators across the country, we work in partnership with the district. So while we're an independent charter, our school sits inside of the district. So the accountability that we have as a school, just scroll back a little bit. The accountability that we have as a school connects to the district as well as to us independently. So bringing along a charter school, a new school, alongside and inside of a failing school was no joke, and it still is very, very challenging. So the district identified our location for our school because it had been chronically low performing. And by underperforming, I mean majorly struggling. So our school where we sit right now was an F for more than 5 years and was facing takeover. The combined pass percentage for ELA and math was 7%. 7%. So they were not just going to school where there were challenges. We were going into a school that needed so much. And sadly, when we came into the school, the parents didn't even know it was a failing school. So bringing the teachers and the kids and the parents and the community alongside at the same time was very challenging, and thank God for year 3 in which we are. So while building a school alongside educators who shared the passion for ensuring a high quality education for all students, I visited a lot of schools across the country that were focused on bilingual education. I was in a 2-year fellowship with the Mind Trust while developing the school, and it was very difficult to find a school where the majority of the students were poor and African American. You just don't see that in bilingual education in this country. So though in my 21st year as an educator, I can truly say that I've never been more challenged, yet equally certain that I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Hard work is humbling. So you think you know everything that you need to know, and then you still realize there's so much yet to learn. So no matter the industry, God just has a way of humbling us, and I stand before you so humble today. As before I opened Global Prep Academy, I thought I knew poverty. I thought I understood trauma and how it impacts students each and every day. But I experience and see things that I never knew existed in schools, let alone in Indianapolis. Like kids who are eating breakfast, lunch, dinner, and snack at school, and after that 2 p.m. snack, they don't eat again until 8:15 in the morning. Students who wear the same clothes every single day that reek of urine, and not because they don't have a washing machine, but because they don't have running water. So while we have 68% of our students who receive free and reduced price lunch, the level of poverty of those students is greater than anything I can ever see, that I've ever seen or could imagine. Many of my students are being raised by single mothers, like many of your students. They're catching the bus alone. They're waiting for food from the food pantry that we have on site on Thursdays, and they live in a constant state of fear. That's their reality. And it's so different from the reality that I know, but learning from them has changed me as an educator. And where fear exists from a child, how can we even begin to expect them to learn when they sit in that state of fear? They take on adult responsibilities and are highly vulnerable, because these are 7-year-olds that discipline their siblings, 7-year-olds who call the shots in their own home. And then those same 7-year-olds are the ones that we educate. And I remember our first year at Global Prep, when we had a first grader, first week of school was rocking our world, running out of the classroom, running out of the building, attacking other kids. And I remember when his teacher came down the first week and her arm was red and had blood on it from being bitten up by this child. Like, how is this happening? This child is 7. What could have been so bad that this is how you react to discipline? And upon investigating and talking to his mother, she finally verbalized what I'm sure was very difficult for her to verbalize. She had to make a decision between keeping this 7-year-old and her 15-year-old because her 15-year-old had been molesting him. These are the kind of challenges that so many of our kids are faced with, yet we're still tasked with educating them in a very rigorous environment. So I realized that I was given a stable childhood so that I was able to provide the nurturing and stability to the children through their good and bad decisions. A whole child can only be educated after their basic needs are met, and one of those basic needs is that safety and trusting relationship. And when you don't have safety and you don't have trust and you can't count on adults in your own home, it's difficult to believe you can count on adults in your school. And these challenges are not unique to my school or to me. And if I pass the mic to any of you, I'm sure you can share similar stories from the students that you work with. But the rub really comes when we talk about these students and the focus of this conference, which is excellence. One of the reasons why I was so excited to keynote this conference was because excellence is something that I think we can all truly relate to. Excellence is a word that rolls off of our tongues. Every day on the morning announcements, my little ones, they say, we must demand excellence from ourselves. And in preparation for this speech, I thought a great deal about that phrase. We must demand excellence for ourselves. And for me and the leaders that I work with in my building, the litmus test for excellence truly for us are the Jasons and Teresas in the building. You see, the measure of a great educator is determined by how you molded and supported the unteachable and the unlovable. How did that educator respond to the child on their worst day? When he threw an iPad and shattered it. That was this week. When he stole from your purse that you'd left out. When he lied right to your face and even called you a bitch. Who are you and who's the educator there? How do you serve that child at their darkest point? And sadly, if we look across the nation, there are some children that are winning in our schools, and there are some that are horribly losing. So if we take a look at this data provided by the U.S. Department of Education and the Center for Educational Statistics from the Pew Research, we can see here 59% of white students are in our high schools, yet they make up 69% of those graduating with a bachelor's degree. Let's take a look at black students. While 16% of them are graduating from our high schools in the United States, they make up 9% of those graduating with a four-year degree. And the statistic is similar for Hispanic students. There's a huge disparity that exists in our adult lives because this does not begin when students of color are in high school. It really begins with the little ones. And I work in a pre-K through sixth grade building, and these are the statistics that we're always looking at. It begins with preschool, and we could talk about access to preschool, but I'm going to start with kindergarten. And the path to excellence begins with how we define it. And I want you to take a look at a kindergarten writing sample, and this is from my own daughter when she was in kindergarten. 6 months into kindergarten. Oh, when the papers come home, and you see your name, Mom, in it, you know. But I remember how her teacher raved about her being such a good writer, that her pictures matched her words, that she began the sentence with a capital letter and she ended with a period. This was 6 months into kindergarten. She was deemed proficient in her classroom because she was among the best in the urban school that I led. Now let's take a look at a kindergarten writing sample that's aligned to Common Core expectations for kindergartners. This sample comes from 5 months in kindergarten. Notice the differences. And this is 2 pages. You see the breakdown, it's taped together. Multiple sentences, capital letters, ending punctuation, connected ideas. The way we define excellence with our youngest students sets the stage for long-term success or temporary gratification. And the reality is that if our teachers and even us as leaders don't know this, we unintentionally lower the bar for our kids. We do it unknowingly. So in order to accelerate excellence, as we're talking about today, we have to be very clear about what excellence is, not just in our buildings, but on a national and international stage. Because students can't begin to compete when they graduate, they have to start now. And we must usher students, staff, and teachers through excellence with the bar of excellence clearly defined. Their lives depend on it. Look at this. Look at the stats from our current prison populations. African Americans make up 12% of the population, yet 33% of the prison population. 12%, 33%. Hispanics, 16% of the population, 23% of the prison population. See, an excellent education is the best weapon that we have against poverty and a life of crime. So what happens in our schools each and every day with our youngest kids, as young as 4 and 5 years old, can set them up for college or usher them right into a prison cell unknowingly. That is the weight that I carry on me every single day, and it's the weight that all of us carry on us working in urban schools. So I believe we can't talk about accelerating excellence and ignore the elephant in the room. And that elephant in the room, I believe, is equity. So equity, love the graphic, is defined as being fair and impartial. And it clearly illustrates what equity is all about. Every child is starting at a different point. And to truly achieve excellence with the unteachables and the unlovables, we have to be willing to acknowledge that the way our schools are set up have to be equitable. Allowing some students access to grade level text, while other groups of kids read 2 and 3 grade levels behind in the same classroom, is compromising equity. Allowing some students the opportunity to learn through projects while others do one worksheet after another worksheet compromises equity. And it's tricky. And it's even hard to hear, I know, among many educators, because we know this to be differentiation. Everybody needs something different, right? But the issue is, when some students are given the keys that allow them to go to the next level and others have no keys at all, we have to question if our approach is equitable. I want to take a few minutes and take you through an exercise that we did as a staff. And this is to break equity apart into our own actions. What does equity look like and sound like in our schools? We're going to take a couple of minutes, and I want you to jot that down. As you walk through a school, whether you're an authorizer, a school principal, an assistant principal, a university professor, when you walk through a school, what does it look like? What does it sound like if you know that it's equitable to all? Let's take a couple of minutes. So let's come back together. Oh, you guys are a great class. I didn't even have to clap my hands or anything. So there is no, of course, there's no right answer here, but I want to just share with you what our team came up with as we talk about what equity looks like in our schools. So the one that I just want to highlight, you can see some of these, and they may be the same as what you indicated on your own list. But I think these are some of the things we don't really think about intentionally, but we have to think about them intentionally if we're really going to accelerate excellence. But the thing I really want to dig into is that 5th bullet point, inclusive versus isolation. Now, it's not uncommon to go to any urban school and see the black boy sitting in the excluded corner away from instruction. Facing the corner often, or facing the window, not even seeing what's happening in the classroom. And this one's one that's really always touches my heart, because my nephew was one of those kids who had more energy in his little body than the whole class had. And I remember when my sister said that he was struggling in school, but his teacher had moved his seat, and his seat was truly behind a partition, and she called it his office. But anytime she was teaching, he couldn't even see. There's no way that children can access education when they're isolated physically and then isolated socially. Another sign that equity is being compromised. Celebrating growth and leaving proficiency out of the question. I know this is touchy, because growth as educators is something that we're always after, and we have to celebrate it. But only through growth can proficiency happen. I totally get it. But we have to remain focused on students reaching the grade level expectation and the grade level standard. Because the long-term effect of students growing every year but never reaching the grade level standard creates a clear gap. This sets the student up to work in the kitchen at the university or clean the floors at the university, but not wear the badge of a student at the university. So growth is important. Growth scores don't admit a child to college, though. Let's look at the sounds like for equity. This was just our list, and I know that there are more things out there. The one I want to focus in on, though, is the strong student voice and making sure students speak in complete sentences. At our school, whenever teachers ask questions and students give one-word answers, we always do this, which is stretch it out. We're preparing our children to go to job interviews, to run companies, to speak publicly. If you're speaking in one-word answers, there's nothing excellent about that. So stretching out their words is something so important. The other piece is calling on multiple students. We were in a classroom, I was in a classroom with a consultant earlier this week, and it was interesting to see how one of our teachers called on the same student over and over and over. And I know what it was. She was nervous we were there. She wanted a child to nail the answer, so she kept calling on the same kid. But what about all the other children in the classroom? Equity's compromised when we continue to go to the one that we know has it without pushing the one who needs to know just as well. I share all that with you today, not because we figured it all out at our school. Far from it. I tell people I can write a book that's like this big about what not to do and this big about what to do. But as we all work to improve our work, there are some lessons that we've learned along the way. And a few of those lessons have led to some principles for us that continue to be our true north towards excellence. And with that desire that our children have to have it in order to achieve it. So as I finish up today, I want to share with you what we call MMLCS. MMLCS. Think for a second. What do you think they stand for? I'll give you 15 seconds. Okay. So this ensures that, excellence remains at the center of our work. Now, the first M, ding, 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 model. Yes. As school leaders, as board members, teachers, authorizers, we have to talk the talk, but you have to walk the walk. It's often been said that teachers make hundreds of decisions a day. This is true. And as leaders, we make tons of decisions every day as well. The difference is we're moving an entire building closer through equity, through excellence, or we can pull it further away. I know that my students and my teachers are watching me every single day. And my girls always tell me if they don't like my outfits or they don't like my shoes and that kind of thing. But beyond that, I want them to learn from how I treat them and how I expect them to treat me. And I model how to love the unlovable and how to teach the unteachable. And to pull that child close to you when he or she has run out of the room in flight from a decision that they made. Just this week when we were with that same authorizer, I heard a child in the hallway like, "Get away from me, get away from me." And I was with a consultant, an evaluator, but in that moment, that child needed me more than that evaluation score. And in that moment, I stopped everything and pulled the child to the teacher's lounge to preserve his dignity as he was screaming like a second grader, yet being a sixth grader. I stayed with the child until the dean came. The model that I hope that I provided is more powerful than any of the words that I could ever say. The second M is the maintaining a high bar. We all know the end game. We're sitting in this room because we played the game and we won at the game. But in order for our students to access higher education, which leads to higher quality of life, we have to keep a high bar. And since we know this bar, we've got to keep it at a high level. We call this the suburbs bar. Now, we're deciding on what work to provide students with, what kinds of questions we'll ask our students. We make sure that those questions are the kinds of questions we would ask in any suburban classroom. Because as soon as we don't, we compromise the equity in that classroom. If the project is an assignment or the quality of the sentence wouldn't be spoken in a suburban school, it shouldn't be accepted in an urban school. Because too often times, Black and brown students go to universities 1 and 2 years behind, taking remedial courses and paying for those remedial courses from an education they should have gotten in K through 12. Just earlier this week, the data came out from last year's ISTEP results, and that's our state test. And the valedictorian at one of the high schools didn't even pass the state test. Now, come on. Struggle is good. We have to teach our students what that struggle is all about. And in fact, that struggle is what develops the grit that employers are looking for today and in the future. So keeping the bar really high so that schools we lead are truly preparing future leaders. Next M. Ooh-wee. Make those tough decisions. From where we all sit, we have a vantage point that many in our classrooms and our staffs don't see. And I'm not sure who said it, but with great power comes great responsibility. And in our work, especially where equity is involved, the decisions we make are tough. And I have to think about over the last 2 years, some of the toughest decisions that I've had to make, both personally and professionally. The decisions that I made based on convenience versus what was right. The decisions I made to save the teacher who was crying in my office and not fight for the child who I needed to advocate for. I ask God to forgive me every day for the decisions I made that weren't good. And one that I'm living with today is I remember in the first 2 years when our school opened, it was hard. I'd never seen children behave this way. And I remember asking myself, is this the right school at the right time in the right place? And so many of my little boys who struggled, I just said, you know what? I can't have them scratching up teachers and cursing and running out of the classroom. Let me just put them in an English-only classroom. And sadly, in our bilingual school, we've got a few English-only classrooms. And they're full of black boys. And as our program grows up, and I go into my 4th grade class where our oldest kids are, we have 3 black children in the class. That's because I didn't make the tough decisions. I did what was convenient in the moment. And I have to forgive myself and make better decisions now. As our 1st graders, they're still struggling. And all over, kindergarten and 1st grade is just tough, isn't it? They're still struggling. But we've got to get it right and not do what's convenient, but make the tough decisions. The L, listen, listen, listen. We have a vantage point that's often 2 or 3 or 4 levels removed from what's actually happening in classrooms. But those on the front lines, our teachers, assistant principals, parents, and students, have a vantage point that's very, very valuable. And to achieve and accelerate excellence, we have to continue to listen, not to respond, not to solve the problem, but to listen and in turn lead with more precision. C, celebrate small successes. Excellence is not something that can be achieved overnight. Nope. Wish it could be. While our goal is to get to 95% attendance rate, 80% pass rates, 90% retention of staff and students, this type of excellence takes time. And we have to be patient with ourselves. And we know it takes 3 to 5 years to turn around a school. 3 to 5 years. And it seems like forever because we're in year 3 and I'm like, when will it end? But we have to celebrate the small wins as they come and be really transparent as we note those on the path to excellence. In our first year as a school, we doubled I-STEP, our state test, pass percentage from 7% to 14% in English language arts and math. Now we all know 14% is not even close to the goal that we have for ourselves. However, doubling I-STEP pass percentages in just 1 year is a big deal. In a district with more than 40 schools, we were in the top 6 schools for growing students. This had to be celebrated. Small successes breed big successes and wins. So it's imperative to get to excellence that we celebrate the small wins along the way. And finally, S, stay connected. Stay connected to what is actually happening in classrooms and in our schools. All of us here in this room are here because of students. Without them, there is no us. And if they are the customer and the product is an excellent education, how do you even know the product is good if you don't even see it? So as principals and administrators, that means we have to build our schedules to actually be in classrooms where the magic is happening. So whether your schedule allows you to be there 1 day a month, a full day per week, you have to make the time. This year, we reorganized our whole school, and we created these smaller learning communities within our school. And one administrator leads 2 grade levels, and we call these houses. So when breaking up a large building of 650 into smaller learning communities, we risk the bar of excellence being defined differently by every leader. So to stay connected to the work and really codify excellence through equity, we do walkthroughs together every single week. By being intentionally in classrooms as the CEO and the principal, it takes 15 to 20% of my time every week. However, it's some of the most critical time that's built into my weekly schedule. You cannot lead what you cannot see. Stay connected. Advocacy is a huge part of our work, and it's only through our presence that we can see the gaps and work to close them so all children succeed. We can never underestimate our impact. So whether you're board chair, a school leader, a part of the authorizing team, your model and bar of excellence is what will propel this work. So I can't imagine serving in any other place with any other type of children. Teresa and Jason showed me many, many years ago that while the work would be challenging, there would be no work more rewarding and more impactful. So like many of you, I remain connected to the students whose lives coincided with mine and changed me for the better. And I'll never forget in April of 2008 when I was in as an assistant principal, and I got a phone call, and I was shocked to hear the voice on the other side of the call. So you know you hear a familiar voice, but it's an unfamiliar place and space. But it was Teresa's mother. And Teresa's mother was calling to ask me to attend her funeral because she'd taken her life. And my heart dropped, and it broke at the same time. I'd just seen her actually like a couple of months ago and hugged her when I saw her when I was visiting a family member in the hospital. And I held her in my heart, and I still do because she was one of my kids. The unteachables and the unlovables are all our children. And it's important to recognize that we're not alone in this work. In urban schools, it's going to take a ton of people, strategic partnerships to make this happen for all of our kids. And while we can't be, as a school, the end-all, be-all to transforming children's lives, we should be a hub for strengthening the communities in which our schools sit. Leveraging partnerships with the university, and a partner like Central Michigan University is more important than ever. So while in this room we sit in different spaces within the educational spectrum, we must recognize that the road to college and a fruitful life beyond begins with the excellence that's accelerated by the tough decisions that we make for the students that we lift up every day. I thank you again for this opportunity to be with you today and to speak at this conference. We are all truly blessed to be working in the field of education, and most importantly, to be leading in the work in service to the unteachables and the unlovables. Those young people who deserve to have their lives transformed through excellence and an excellent education we provide. Thank you so much, and have a great conference.